All right, and to more politics in the country. NASA principals are expected to meet again today to iron up issues surrounding the sharing of parliamentary committee slots. Now, today's meeting is just a follow-up of another meeting yesterday where the principals are said to have met at the current country club but failed to resolve the outstanding issues. So what could be going on within the opposition coalition? Well, in studio for this conversation is a governance expert, Javas Bigambo. Many thanks for staying on with us. And we also have Executive Director Siasa Place and Rima Wako Ojiwa. Let's focus on this, considering that there is some disquiet seemingly within the opposition now. And the leaders will be meeting again today with regard to wrangling forces within the four partner parties of the sharing of parliamentary slots. ODM is said to have taken leadership of the most important parliamentary slots, if we could go by the words of the members themselves. What does this mean for the future of the coalition?
Well, one, I will tie it to some remarks that were one time made by our former Secretary of State of the US, Henry Kissinger, who said, America doesn't have permanent friends, it has permanent interests. And that is the spirit in politics.
Right.
In politics, there are no permanent friendships, only permanent interests. As long as those interests shift, there will be disquiet. As long as those interests shift, friendships will break or suspicions will arise. Suspicion upon suspicion is what has been happening in NASA. There are those that fingers of accusation have been pointed at them, that they are having some background discussions and negotiations with the Jubilee Party or the Jubilee leadership. There are those that have been feeling uneasy with the kind of communication that has been happening between the top leadership of NASA and possibly State House, etc., and so forth and so following. The thing is this. When you look at the power games that have happened within NASA and the big brother push by ODM, then you realize that these other parties start feeling that they are treated or they're being treated as lesser partners or as fringe parties within that coalition. Now, when you look at the allocation or distribution of positions within the House, you realize that most of those plum positions have gone to individuals who are members of ODM. Naturally, Wiper will be disgruntled. Ford Kenya, as equal partners as well, will be disgruntled, etc. The other thing is this. Question arises, what is in this coalition for all these parties?
Right.
Now, and even moving toward 2022, or whatever time that elections will be held. Because the pact that they have had was a pact for the 2017 elections. And that, remember that the kind of agreement that was deposited with the Registrar of Political Parties was that a subsequent election happening, Honorable Raila Odinga will not run for office, will support Kalonzo Musyoka, etc. But the same way CORD died a natural death, by suspicions being there, by push and pull because of various political interests, the fissures that are evident today within NASA are not imaginative fissures. It's real that there is so much disquiet within NASA, and that the unequal distribution of slots within the within Parliament itself has made the other parties party leaders to feel, or co-principals to feel left behind, or to feel less important. And that is why closed-door meetings will not resolve this. Because in politics, it's not a question of having negotiations behind the curtains and giving firm promises and firm commitments. It's a question of what benefits, what interests are brought about by benefits, not just for the leadership, but also for the other members. Because remember, it's not a question of just what Kalonzo Musyoka gets or what Honorable Wetangula gets or what Raila Odinga gets. It's also about the other leaders, parliamentarians, senators, etc., within this coalition. And that's why this kind of disquiet will not be cured merely by a closed-door meeting.
Good. We'll be taking a look at what the law says in terms of distributing these positions. But so far, the controversy is over 8 parliamentary committees, most importantly being the leadership of 2 powerful watchdog committees meant for the opposition. That is the Public Accounts Committee and the Public Investments Committee. We so far have Opiyo Wandayi in PSC and Abdul Somad Sharif in PIC, and those are both from ODM. What we're hearing now is that there seems to be more disquiet with Wiper parties, Kalonzo Musyoka and Ford Kenya's Wetangula, not being as excited about the possible swearing-in of Raila Odinga on the 30th of January. And, of course, they've been very close, in terms of forging forward as a team in that. How is that likely to affect the future of the coalition?
Well, it definitely affects the unity. You know, the thing about politics is it's not what is, it's the perception of what it is. And the interesting thing about everything, that it hasn't been verbally said by either one of them, right, but it's just people reading out what they see. And we've only seen, for instance, Miguna speaking loudly about January 30th, but we haven't quite seen Raila saying anything, Wetangula saying anything, or Kalonzo saying anything. Right. So at the same time, politics in Kenya is very interesting because it tends to be unpredictable. And a lot of times I say it's a soap opera. We don't quite know what to expect on the 30th. There might be a swearing in, they might not be. But one thing that is visible is that the voice is not the same. Right. There's no unified voice as to what NASA intends to do in the next few days. There are just a lot of signals and smoke signals, and none of us can quite interpret the meaning of it. Right. So we've jumped into our own conclusions in that perhaps the other principals are not in agreement with Raila swearing in on the 30th.
There have been concerns that some saying, or critics saying that, disgruntled leaders like Kalonzo Musyoka are misinterpreting the law. But what does the law say, Javas, in terms of distributing these positions?
Now, you see, if you come together in a pre-election coalition as equal partners, then whatever slots, whatever opportunities that are due to the party or to the coalition or to the side of this arrangement should be distributed equally. Now, for instance, one would have expected that an important slot would go, for example, if it's the accounts committee going to ODM, for example, then give the other, say, to Wiper or Ford Kenya. But when it appears that the lion's share of opportunities are going only to one part or one party within the coalition, then itself it injures the spirit and the glue, the adhesive that holds that coalition packed together. Right. So it amounts to a violation because it is a breach of the spirit, a breach of confidence and trust, but then again, a breach of that agreement that is supposed to be holding together in terms of distribution of positions, etc. And that has happened already. We're not going to see a revision of that. And that's why NASA right now has been invaded by suspicion and outveded by trust. And that's why the kind of suspicion that is within NASA is going to linger on for some time, until maybe we get to see the other coalition party members getting to benefit from other significant opportunities. It is going to be very difficult to convince, for example, the members, not just a question of Honorable Wetangula, the members of Ford Kenya, the members of NASA, that the interests of their party are at the heart of the NASA arrangement. And that being said, like you say, Nerima, perception really is what drives politics. With the resistance agenda, with civil disobedience going on, a plan swearing in on the 30th of January, NASA here is relying on swearing in Raila Odinga as the people's president. How do you think the people's perception will change from what's happening, with the wrangles within the opposition?
Well, that's a difficult question because I don't know if it will change. I know people who were pro the movement right when it started, and people were moving off of Safaricom and doing everything that was told for them to do.
Buying milk,
yes,
and all these things.
But if you speak with some of those same people today, they'll tell you, I'm fed up. You've you've lifted my spirits and then you've let me down, you know, because we thought that there was going to be a swearing in on the 12th, and then it didn't happen. And so, you know, you've played with people's emotions. And so just like how movements occur, human beings get worn out. And NASA has failed in the aspect of using that energy and using strategy to be able to manipulate that energy. So I feel that there will be a group of people who are pushing for the swearing in. And no matter what, those are the die-hard supporters. But there are others who are sort of in a limbo, where they just want a change, a difference. They're not necessarily NRM supporters, but they just want to see something different. For them, it might not make that much of an impact. Because what does it mean for you swearing in? What is your power going to be? There's still one president sitting in State House. That doesn't change that fact. And so a lot of people are saying that for Right Honorable Raila, it's a major moment because it's not about him. It has moved from it being about him as an individual. It's about his supporters. Is he going to gather the courage to support those NRMers who have said they're with him from the beginning? Or is he going to take the logical or perhaps the safer approach that he would think? We've seen him play that approach before. In 2006, where he chose to take a route where he felt for the greater good of the majority, I will choose to sit this out. So for him, I believe it's going to be a major decision. And the side that he chooses to pick, it will show us that perhaps he has changed. If he chooses
that's
to
what
swear
many people will be waiting for. But the creation and normal functioning then of these parliamentary committees, of course, plays a key aspect in service delivery and implementation of certain legislation in the country. And already we've seen a seemingly large rift between members of parliament affiliated to the Jubilee Party and those affiliated to the NASA coalition. Let's take, for example, the Public Service Commission and the East African Legislative Assembly positions. Some positions that have been disputed for a rather long time. How is this, in your view, Bigambo, likely to affect the working? Because for the East African Legislative Assembly, for example, it has been stalled, for the better part of the year, pretty much, of 2017, because of the wrangles going on in Kenya.
Beyond the substantive issues that these committees always handle, at times I struggle to take these committees seriously by the politics that bedevil them. Because when you look at the history of all these parliamentary committees, you realize that even the most important committees have, had corruption allegations leveled against them, etc. Questions of them being less keen on matters of accountability and pushing for it for the general public, for the greater good of the public, and in the spirit of the law, etc. I would just hope that throughout this period, for example, all these teams and even all those members that were nominated and then successfully ended up at the East African Legislative Assembly, that they are going to perform their duties for the benefit of Kenya, for the benefit of Kenyans. Because it's against logic and public good when we get to have very fine instruments and platforms that do not get milked for the greater good by the public and for the public and with the public. Now, when you look at the composition of the House today, yes, majority is Jubilee. Is it possible that we get to see Jubilee pushing a public agenda that leads to transformation and not what we are witnessing today, where people are talking about using their numbers, using their positions for purposes of political realignments for 2022. In fact, it is a premature discussion that has already started, whether it is in the, in the newsrooms, etc., in the papers, etc., and even in political rallies. It would be important for all these leaders to realize right now that now, having been done with the election 5 months ago, is it possible for them to diligently, resolutely serve the public? All these public accounts committee, the public service commission, etc., and committees, the agriculture committees, all these accountability issues that have been at the points of discussion for the public, for their interest, are issues that right now should get parliamentarians and senators, all of them, working for Kenya. But that has not started, showing yet. And that's why, for me, I would expect the leadership at the Senate, the leadership in the National Assembly, to make sure that they drive the agenda for public service delivery.
Nerima, even as we move on from this, I want us to discuss the Nairobi County politics in just a moment. But looking at the push that the opposition has been championing for political reforms, justice, most importantly, is that being reflected by the opposition in what they're doing now?
No, it is not, because I remember when they first launched their manifesto, the main thing that was in it was the nationhood, bringing all the tribes together, and this patriotism and thinking about socialism in a sense. Right. And, you know, the interesting thing about having up to 5 political parties uniting, it's about equality. Everyone must feel that within that political party or that coalition, they have a fair chance of leadership of positions or anything like that. So it has to be the structures within this coalition to see that as much as the positions, let's say, are limited, people need to understand how those decisions were made. So there needs to be transparency and there needs to be accountability for those decisions. Right. So we can clearly see that perhaps in that coalition, there's a lot of opaqueness when it comes to decisions being made, and then they are not being fair. But is it possible? The answer is yes, because when you look at countries like Germany with the Bundestag, you can have a majority party and a minority party working together almost in equal terms. And so it's possible to have that in a sense where perhaps some parties are larger, but they find ways to accommodate the smaller parties where they don't necessarily feel swallowed. So it's quite interesting to see that the party or the coalition that was saying that they want a fair system in our country and putting all these things and structures in place when it comes to the different departments that we have is struggling with their own party and having that fairness with their own coalition. So it's as much as saying that there's this 1 Timothy 4:12 talks about youth. Do not let people look down upon you because of your youth. Right. But that verse continues. It says that you must live in responsibility and purity and just. So we have to hold the coalition accountable. As much as they're saying we want justice, we want fairness in Kenya, we want access to rights and freedom, that should be reflected within their coalition. Right. And right now, we're not seeing that.
Right. And they will be taking a look at how that meeting turns out today, whether they will be coming to any agreements or, solutions. But let's move on to the controversy surrounding the resignation of Nairobi Deputy Governor Polycarp Igathe just 5 months into office. While Nairobi Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko spoke out about the saga for the first time, downplaying any differences between him and his governor. Sonko further says he will consult residents of Nairobi on the way forward. A lot has been said about Polycarp Igathe's resignation. But let me begin with you, Bigambo, very briefly. Many are asking, should he rescind his decision to resign? Should he not? But more importantly, how is this fallout likely to affect or shape the Uhuru succession?
Well, one, the subject has been chewed into pulp already. And thing is, it's brought in a couple of confusing issues by the manner in which it was done and whatnot, how long the governor has taken to speak on this matter. It is all right for the governor to consult the people of Nairobi. However, there are those quarters that are asking or imploring the deputy governor outgoing to rescind his decision and swallow his pride. But the trust already has been lost. He's lost the trust and the confidence already. He can't work now with the governor. If they get to work together, it will be a struggle. It will be a struggle for the entire period. Lost the trust and the confidence of the people of Nairobi. Because when they passionately took to the Agora and implored the people of Nairobi to vote for them because they were the best, and the people in affirmation said, okay, fine, we're going to vote for you. And then they took the reins of power. And then shortly after that, you resign. It is the people that you've let down. Because Honorable Igathe, through his resignation letter, did not say that I have struggled to work with the people of Nairobi. He talked about the governor and they were an entire ticket. It would be important then for us to ask ourselves, where do we move from here in terms of holding public office holders to account?
Right.
Because that's the most critical thing. And I've spoken about this, that it is, I think, immature for members or for leaders who hold public office to choose to leave office without holding themselves or being held accountable to the people. Because, and matters of natural justice apply. Today, if any public office holder was to be hunted out of office, they will go to the courts. The courts will have to pronounce themselves on that matter. And the rules of justice will have to apply, whether it's matters administrative law, etc.
All right,
Today,
I have to pause you, Javas. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. Let me just have you finish that point.
Yes. Today, then, the people of Nairobi must hold Honorable Igathe to account as to why he chose to leave office, and why is it that also he has turned again his back on the public confidence.
All right, and Narima, unfortunately, we will not be giving you a comment on that. We're out of time. But many thanks for joining us. Javas Bigambo is a governance expert, and Narima Wako Ojiwa is the executive director from Siasa Place, joining us on a conversation here on News Center. Many thanks for watching. My name is Michelle Ngere. Do stay